With so many fundraisers taking our courses and engaging in our community, we see a lot of people asking the same questions. And most of those questions are really about the basics of relational fundraising, the system and structure of the Veritas way. For today's episode, we've collected some of the most common questions that even the most seasoned fundraisers sometimes need a reminder about. So stay tuned and make sure you've got the basics down.
Welcome to the Nothing But Major Gifts podcast from Veritas Group, featuring Richard Perry and Jeff Schreifels. Twice a month, we bring you the latest and best thinking about major gift fundraising, so you can develop authentic relationships with your major donors. Here are your hosts, Richard and Jeff.
Welcome to the podcast today. I'm Jeff Schreifels, and I've got Richard Perry here with me. In our work at Veritas, we get to interact with hundreds of fundraisers through consulting, our online academy, and our community hub. While we get a lot of questions that we would deem advanced, many are really about the basics. And Richard, you know that if you don't have the basics down, it doesn't matter what kind of new strategies you want to put in place, it won't work without implementing those basics. So today, we're going to talk about some of the basics we consistently get questions about, and at many organizations where they're still struggling to get it down.
Yeah, we know that it's really hard to stay on track with a system or a structure. I mean, it is. You kind of get off track. But even if you have all the resources you need, keeping yourself accountable and focused is challenging for the best of us. And while this really isn't rocket science, there are a lot of components that require a very, very disciplined approach.
That's exactly right. It isn't rocket science, but it's hard work to keep focus and discipline, as Richard just said. So let's get started with the first basic question our team has heard in the field many, many times. And here it is. Veritas always recommends keeping donors in direct mail. Does that mean you shouldn't be directly asking for donors for money?
Well, here's the thing. Why do we say keep the donors in direct mail? Why do we recommend that?
Well, because most of the donors who are now major gift donors have come from direct mail. So they gave their first gift through a direct mail piece. They were cultivated that way, and they've been giving that way, in addition to perhaps giving larger gifts one-on-one. But, you know, that's what they're used to. And in many cases that we've heard from donors, they like getting it because it gives them a clue of what's going on at the organization.
Exactly. And I think the other point, Jeff, is like when you, and we've experienced this a lot, you take a donor and you move them out of direct mail. Because why? Because you put them on a caseload.
Right.
And then the caseload strategy doesn't actually start in kind of engaging with the donor for 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
So now there's this gap of communication between the organization and the donor that they're used to. I mean, we've actually seen revenue go down because we've taken people out of direct mail.
And huge amounts too.
Yeah, big amounts. So, I mean, and oftentimes the whole business of, well, if we leave them in direct mail and then they're on the caseload as well, isn't that a duplication of effort? I mean, how would you answer that?
No, I would say it's something that you're enhancing. So you're still allowing the donor to give through those ways if they want to, but you're at the same time deepening that relationship with the donor. You're finding out specifically what are the things that they're passionate about and what are their interests, so that you can, figure out all the different programs and projects you have and match that up to ultimately ask for a very large gift, which they're most likely not going to do through direct mail. No one's giving $1 million. I shouldn't say no one, because I'm sure it's happened. But very few donors give very large gifts through direct mail. It's through that personal one-to-one outreach.
Well, but I think the big point there is if you take them out, they're probably not going to hear from you. And that's the big point right there. Now, here's another basic. you have to ask for a gift.
Yeah.
Now, remember that remember
Oh,
that
yeah.
one guy that we that development what was it, the development director or the major gift?
Yes,
I
it
mean,
was the
a
development
very
director.
large organization. I mean, it was like
Yeah.
probably 20, 25 million. What did he say?
He said, I just want to start this meeting by saying I have never had to ask for a gift. And like he was really proud of that. Like for 25 years, he's been in development. He said, I've never had to ask for a gift. And we're looking around at each other going, and that's a badge of honor? What
Well,
is,
and especially in light of the analysis we had done of the
oh,
donor file, of his donor
yeah.
file, which was a total absolute disaster.
Yeah. So we were like, no, no wonder your file's in shambles. You
I
never
know.
asked for a gift.
It's so interesting. This whole thing about asking is such an interesting thing for me, Jeff, because it's like, okay, why aren't you asking for a gift? Well, A, it's not necessary, or it'll dawn on them that they need to give, or something like that. And what we keep telling folks is, if you buy into the philosophy, which we have been propagating and evangelizing about, you buy into the philosophy that fundraising is not about the money.
Right.
The actual thing that you do with the donor in asking for a gift is you're giving them an opportunity to express their passions and interests.
Exactly.
And that's a gift to the donor. So why wouldn't you be doing that?
Exactly. I
I
think
mean,
there's just that holds up people a lot. They think, oh, I'm taking something away from someone. It's the opposite. You're enhancing their life. You're doing something they want to do, and they find joy in giving that gift. So you're essentially robbing them of that joy by
exactly.
not asking a donor to give.
So for maybe we ought to say is the reason you need to ask for a gift is because it's a gift to the donor that you're going to give them, and by not doing that, you're taking something away from them. I mean, that's a huge thing.
Yeah. Some other points about the direct mail thing is you can use direct mail as part of your overall strategy of cultivating and stewarding those donors. There's especially around newsletters that they send out. You can personalize those with notes. You can call the donor ahead of time or right after they receive it saying, hey, I just want to give you a heads up about an article in that newsletter that I think that you would like because you're interested in
Exactly.
XYZ.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, now, some of the thing, one of the things I've noticed, Richard, from organizations who have essentially grown up or built their donor file through direct response. So they're really, they spent
Right.
millions on acquisition and cultivating those
Mhm.
low dollar donors. And now they are starting, and then they have like a fledgling major gift program, is that they do rely on direct response or direct mail or emails to have their donors give. And where the direct basically the MGO is kind of just stewarding or thanking. They're not actually trying to get to know them much. They're just being nice and like, oh,
Mhm.
you're so wonderful, donor. And then they just rely on, well, every November that donor gives and they give through this appeal.
Which
So I'm
which
not
which
gonna,
means they're missing a number of gifts from the donor as well.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. And we see it in the files, when you see a donor give $1,000 every year, the same amount, or 2,500, 5,000, even 10,000, they're that means that somebody is not reaching out to them. It means the donor's just giving that same amount. And because we've been so happy that they're continuing to give and that they're loyal, we don't get in there and try to really figure out the donor's passions and interests and just rely on the direct mail piece to bring the $5,000 or $10,000 they're going to do in November in.
Right. So far we've done, you got to leave them in direct mail. Secondly, you've got to ask for the gift.
You got to ask.
The third thing is, this is so basic. Pay attention to the donor's preferences and interests and passions and communication preferences. Pay attention to that. Now,
Yeah.
why?
Because it honors the donor, number one. We know that if that the donor knows, then we've heard them. If you honor how they want to give, they're more apt to engage with you, right? I
I
mean,
know exactly.
yeah,
I mean, the experiences I've had, I remember this, and it happens way too often where you give to something and you express an interest. So you give something to category number one,
yeah,
and you get information back on categories two and three.
right,
And you're not interested in two and three, you're interested in one, but they aren't paying attention. So that immediately is a very clear signal that the organization is just interested in your money. They don't really care about you.
exactly.
So paying attention to those donor preferences and interests is so important.
Yep,
Now, we've already touched on this one, but just to reiterate again, the basic thing is thinking properly about money and fundraising, that the fundraising thing is not about money.
right,
And that's a basic. Now, I think the reason that it's not a basic in most philanthropic circles and most organizations is it seems counterintuitive, because when you say development or fundraising, that sends your mind down to money.
yeah, right.
Now, how to get out of that is I mean, how would you suggest we get out of that kind of thinking?
Well, what we've been preaching for years is you need to develop that relationship. Out of building that relationship, figuring out that donor's passions and interests, their communication, all those things, figuring that out, deepening getting to know that donor will result in the money. Rather than going after the money first, you may actually get a gift.
Oh, you will
You
probably,
won't
yeah.
get the relationship. Donors need to feel like they can trust you. If they're going to give 6-7 figure gifts to your organization, they're only going to be able to do that if you've established a level of trust that they feel like, oh, I can do this with them and I feel good about it.
And I mean, the other thing about this whole philosophy is that it's truly it has a spiritual dimension to it, and we mean that with a small s, not a religious spiritual. But
Yeah,
it has there's an intangible to that whole thing. It's about the donor's journey. It's about them feeling fulfilled. It's about affirming a portion of the reasoning as to why they're even on the planet.
right.
It's like, wow, I'm helping somebody else out, or I'm saving a forest or an animal, or I'm
Exactly.
dealing with this, solving this cancer problem or whatever.
Yeah.
So important. Okay, the next basic thing is this:
Yeah.
the importance of telling the donor that she made a difference. Um, wow, Jeff, this is a huge one.
Yeah.
Now, what is our analysis? Most of our attrition analysis show that proves that this isn't being done well.
Well, we see anywhere between a donor gives 1 year, at the next year, we lose like 40 to 60% of the value in the
Mm-hmm,
next year.
mm-hmm.
You put that with all the hundreds of donors that are giving, that's a huge amount of revenue being lost year over year. Why? Because that's the number one reason why donors go away. They don't know how their gifts made a difference. They don't know the impact of their gift. And that's important. And when they don't ever hear back from you, what happened? Now think about this, because this happens all the time.
I
Someone gives
know.
a $50,000 gift and then they never hear back from the organization. What happened? They might get a thank you, thank you for the all that. Then they never hear back again. Like, what actually happened? What did it do? And donors typically are not that picky as far as how you report back. As far as, it's like, just get back to them and say, hey, I just wanted to follow up with you on that gift. Here's what it's doing. It's not like you have to have a 10-page report on exactly what that gift did. I mean, it could be even a video just saying, hey, I wanted to
Something
show the
simple.
impact of that gift.
Yeah, I've actually
Don't do it.
likened. I know I've likened this whole thing to like how it affects me personally. Like, for instance, like, let's say I'm sitting here in my home in North Carolina, and my friend Bill up the street asked me to come help him with a project in the garage.
Yeah.
And it's a fairly complicated project, so I go up and I help them. It takes 3 hours. I've taken a bunch of time out. I even went to Lowe's and bought some stuff, and and gave it to them and transported it, and then we're done. And I never hear from them.
Yeah.
Hey, Richard, uh, boy, I tell you, the thing that it really made a difference. I really never hear a word. You just feel bad, and
Yeah.
everyone listening to this podcast right now has been through experiences like that,
Yeah.
where you do something for somebody,
Yeah.
or you think something's going to make a difference. You hear total silence, and then you wonder,
Well,
are you
I would
going to
even
come
say,
back and do it
yeah,
again?
even if you do that, Richard, and you go, oh, I don't need to hear from them, and most people who give say, well, I've, but even if you feel like I don't need to hear back, when you don't hear back, there is this little niggle, right?
Of course
Like,
there is.
what's going on? What happened there? Didn't they care? Did they care about this? So this is an area of nonprofits who really want to stand out could do so much. If they could just report back the impact, they'd be well above all the other organizations out there. And they would get a
It'd be
larger
huge.
donor share of their gifts if they did this well. We have story after story of donors who have said, you know what, I was going to give another gift to my alma mater, but they never talk to me. You talk to me, you tell me what, and therefore I'm going to give you what I was going to give them in addition to what I was going to give you,
We've seen that happen
over and over.
so often. I mean, and these are huge amounts of money. Yeah. Do you have any other top points that you want to comment on, Jeff?
Well, I think on that point, that's the big one. We get
Mm-hmm.
this other question a lot around building strategic plans for donors.
Mm-hmm.
One is a basic one is, do you actually need to have a plan
Mm-hmm.
for a donor? And we're our total thing about the Veritas way is, yes, you have to have a plan for every donor,
Exactly.
because you're trying to fulfill the passions and interests of the donor. And to do that, you need to have a plan for how you're going to develop that, how you're going to understand that, and then how you're going to execute on that. And then similarly, in their planning, they're always asking, like, how many touch points do you need to send to a donor every year? And then should you have to personalize those touch points by each of those donors? And we respond to that by saying, yeah, you need to have at least one touch point a month, planned. And yes, you need to personalize those based on the donor.
Yep.
Now, there can be some things that, okay, everyone gets a newsletter, but the personalized side is that, well, maybe your A levels get a handwritten note. Maybe your B and C just get a little sticky note. But there's something personal to each one of those things that everyone is getting. But then there are other things directly related to the donor's passions and interests that you need to think about. Like if the donor only cares about feeding and meals, then you're going to develop a plan around that, and those touch points are going to be around those
Exactly.
issues.
So you cannot send the same thing to everyone. I mean, even if you
No.
have something like an annual report uh, that you want to send to the whole caseload,
Yeah.
you can add personalized notes
Right.
and call out key things that the donor is interested in.
Yes.
And that's a mistake that's often made, probably because it's like, well, I want to be efficient here. I mean, it's easier, so I'm
Yeah.
just going to send the same thing to everybody. Well, you can't do that. So I
And
think
well,
the other thing
this is
that
the beauty, isn't it? This is the beauty of major gifts, is that you only have 150 people, so that you have the time to think about this and do these personalized touch points, because they've, if your organization has been just sending out mass stuff to them for years, now they're in a portfolio. This is when you start to get personal. This is the beauty of major gifts.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Here's another thing about touch points, and it's a quick point I want to make, is that it's a touch point doesn't necessarily equal a mailing.
Right.
I mean, it really doesn't. I mean, touch points, what we mean by that is that they're thoughtful, meaningful, relevant opportunities to connect with donors and
Yes.
share about their impact, their passions, and their lives. So and a touch point doesn't have to be some highly produced.
No.
I mean, that's the other thing is like, okay, we got to have a collateral piece and it's, four color and,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And it goes on with all these details. And it's just not necessary. It could be a handwritten note, a letter,
It could be a
a
text.
copy of some. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. All of that stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's another one that we get. This question is, do you need to do all 7 steps of the qualification process if you don't get a two-way interaction with your donors? What do you say about that?
Well, you're not going to annoy them by doing the 7 steps. And
No.
and the point really is to give them the space to tell you exactly what they want from you. I mean, the reason we have the 7 steps is because, well, first of all, we've proven that it takes that much to kind of actually get to the bottom of it and give people a time to respond.
Yes.
But the other thing is, and you got to think about this, is from our point of view, the 7 steps seems like, oh my goodness, this is just like huge amount of effort.
Yeah.
From their point of view, well, the first 2 steps, I was out on vacation over in Boston.
Right.
And the other step, I was in a business meeting in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get that, or I ignored it, or I filed it, or so there's all these dynamics going on. And I think the thing is that you just have to realize you're not going to annoy somebody by
Right.
giving the donor enough opportunity to say that they want to engage or don't want to engage. I mean, that's the point.
Exactly.
Mhm.
It was funny. I was at a recent breakfast in Philadelphia here, and one of our former clients from a public media station, they were there, and they came up to me and they said, the best thing that we've learned from the Veritas Way is this whole qualification thing.
Yeah,
And the fact that you have these 7 steps, she said, you wouldn't believe how many donors didn't engage until step 6 and 7.
exactly.
But
Yep.
you guys preach, stay with it, stay persistent. And I'm so glad I did, because a huge number of donors finally got back to me after I sent that 6th or 7th touch point. And so that just was another affirmation that, if you don't hear from them at 2nd or 3rd, that's when most people they're not going to respond. You
Well,
got
it's
to
the same.
stick with it.
It's the same in direct mail frequency. I mean,
Yeah.
we've been through this too. So,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I recently had a situation where a client was basically saying, "Yeah, we're going to probably mail just one time during the year." I said, "What? One time?" Uh,
Well, we don't want to bug the donor.
yeah. So no, you need to mail up to. I mean, some organizations mail up to 24 times, depending on what
Yeah.
segment it is,
Yeah.
or 18 times.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's just, here's the reason: people are busy.
Yeah.
And so, or the topic of what you're sending out might not appeal to them, so they
That's
ignore
right.
it, and so they're picking. So that's why frequency and is so important. Okay,
That's right.
here's another one that we talk a lot about, Jeff.
Okay.
And here's what it is: if your donor has a high wealth rating, do you need to qualify them, and do you use wealth ratings to tier donors?
Yeah. Well, we're a little tough on those wealth ratings, because
Mhm.
they can really pull attention and focus away from the donors who are actively engaging and giving generously. So in other words, there are a lot of organizations that look at this wealth thing as the way
I know.
to look at what donors they should be cultivating,
Right.
rather than looking at their current giving of donors. They can have a donor on, it's giving $100 or something, but they have a wealth rating, that's just through the roof. So they're going to put all their time on that one donor. Whereas they have other donors who are giving $100,000 a year, and they're not cultivating them because their wealth rating is not as high as the one who's given $100. So there's all this emphasis
Right.
on wealth ratings, especially universities, they're terrible at this. They fill up portfolios for major gift officers at universities based on wealth ratings, and then say, well, based on their wealth rating, you should be able to bring in $3 million from this portfolio.
That's just absolutely crazy.
Crazy. Now, they can help give you a better picture of what the donor's potential is, but really it's about their current giving that we want to focus on and use that, because that shows us how engaged they are, right?
Well, is that and the other dynamic there is, do you want a net worth person of $1 million who loves to give you $100,000, or do you want a person of a net worth of $100 million that's giving you $25?
Right.
It's a little counterintuitive, and it feels like you might be missing something, but really that smaller net worth person is more valuable to you.
Yeah.
Is showing inclination and involvement and behavior that is basically they're with you. The other person's not with you. They're not with you.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Yeah.
So I mean that's why we think about wealth ratings in this way.
That's not to say that you don't keep an eye on that big donor
Of course.
who's 25, and you might create some strategies to see if they would go from 25 to 250 to 1,000, those kind of things.
You would.
But you don't set up your portfolio based on it.
Or put them in a tier, an A tier to, I mean, that's where the mistake is. It's like the same thing that we've heard so many times. Hey, you need to go. I met this guy at Rotary, and he's very influential. He's on the city council, and he owns 2 companies, and therefore you ought to spend time with him. No, that's not a good use of time.
Exactly.
It's the same dynamic.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks, Richard, for joining me today on this episode and helping answer some of these basic questions that people have. And I hope this has helped you be reminded of the basics that you need to have down to be successful in major gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to learn more about our data-proven system and structure and get all the pieces you need to create a robust major gift strategy, then I highly recommend joining our certification course for major gift fundraisers. You can find the link to learn more about this course and sign up for an upcoming session by visiting the show notes or heading to our website under training. Take care, and we hope to see you in the upcoming course.
See you soon.
Thank you for joining us for the Nothing But Major Gifts podcast from Veritas Group. Richard and Jeff also write an ongoing blog that you can subscribe to for free at veritasgroup.com. Please join us again next time.